with interfaith communities, in particular through Heads of Washington office, which I'm a part of, and also other interfaith dialogues that have actually taken place. We are doing it in local churches as well. Let me just say another thing about where we are politically and with the media, because I think that's a driving force of all of this that we're dealing with today. Washington is what you see. It's no need in me sitting here trying to explain it, because you see it every day. That's one thing that individuals cannot say is distorted by media. It is actually upraised by media. And media is enamored with it because it helps to sell. You've got two things happening in this political sphere right now. One is that politicians are driven in Washington, and when I use the word politicians, let me just kind of qualify that. Not all politicians, but a vast majority of them are driven by public opinion polls. And I do believe that anytime you are a follower of public opinion and not a molder of public opinion, then you have lost a great deal of ability to lead. And what we're seeing is followers of public opinion. Votes are being cast in Washington based on how you're going to vote and what you say in opinion polls, not on conviction, oftentimes. That's what we see. And so this whole political season that you're looking at right now, politicians might say anything, whether they believe it or not. But they're going to say it because some data has been given to them to suggest that their particular district is driven by this particular action that they're moving toward. It is interesting to get to know some of these politicians, quite frankly. Many of whom, in fact, most of whom are Presbyterian. You know, they're actually good people. But when it comes to voting time, driven by party lines, driven by public opinion, driven by what is going to get me reelected, all of that goes out of the window, and we see the banging on the table, and we see the finger pointing, and we see the speeches that just ratchet up. And in reality, they walk away from that limelight and that stage. And they're the most gracious people you've ever known. It is an amazing thing, because it is political theater. And I think we need to understand that one. And the only way that that one can be transformed is that we be transformed. To declare something different, and to stand on that in our communities and call these politicians into accountability. Now, having said that, the power of being reelected, I don't think I need to go into all that. I think you understand what reelection means to most of them individually and personally. It is a lot of power in a lot of ways. And so this thing of election right now has grabbed everything in the national spotlight. People with foolish talk are getting a lot of airtime because, number one, newspapers are not selling. And so it is becoming more of a tabloid. Tiger can go on for months. All he was doing Tiger, but for months. Lindsay Lohan is doing Lindsay, but it goes on for months. And why? Because we are caught up into this kind of drama in our society. Politicians understand that one, and so they create drama. Okay. The difficulty in this one is that this is not Lindsay Lohan making a statement where people can just hear it and say, oh, she's high. These are people who actually have been elected to govern making statements, and some people really buy into that. And so we have to do a better job, and I'm not here from Washington to throw all of the responsibility back on folks. That's not what I'm doing tonight. But I am saying that we have to do a better job of organizing at the bottom and declaring something very different. And doing that in a way where we're registering the kinds of concerns that are connected to the very policy that our General Assembly has stood on for years. The Washington office has been open for now 64 years. We'll be celebrating a 65th anniversary next year. I'm amazed at the number of Presbyterians as I started in this job in May who don't even know that the Washington office exists. I'm amazed at the number of Presbyterians who've never had a relationship with the Washington office over the years. And it is because politics has changed. There was a time when we could walk right across the street, have a conversation with Congress, where Eugene Carson Blake, the state clerk of this denomination, could actually sit down with John Kennedy just by picking up the phone and calling him and saying, "Hey Jack, I'm in town, I want to talk with you." And they would sit down at the White House. John Kennedy would prepare lunch. They would sit down at the White House and have a conversation that would literally shake something down. You were talking about the leader of the ecumenical movement. You were talking about the state clerk of the Presbyterian Church USA sitting with the president of the United States of America. I'm talking about Time Magazine state clerk. I'm talking about Look Magazine cover state clerk of the denomination. Most of us in mainline Protestant denominations have lost a level of clout since those days. And even working in our ecumenical groups today, we have lost a great deal of the prophetic edge of ministry and what it means to see our work as prophetic. And like the Washington dictate actually moves us, is that we are to cozy up to power. Just kind of go to the parties and go to the other things that they do and ask for a conference and sit down and have a nice dialogue with them. But they are driven by something else today. They're driven by an apathetic electorate. 19, 18, 17, in some places even 9% of people voting in their district. They're going to try to split that 9% as best they can or get as much of that as they can and basically move from there. And they know how to polarize that and to galvanize that block of voters that they need to get reelected. It is very much a game. And I just want to do some truth-telling in this one because this is what we face. And so there really is no power in a Washington office if we don't have the ability to come on the ground and ratchet up some strength, particularly voting power, particularly us engaging the process through our voices and through our organizing. Tea Party arises overnight out of fear. 17 of them standing on the steps of the Supreme Court building on the day that Kagan was announced as the next nominee of the Supreme Court. I went down to count them. I'm from Orangeburg, South Carolina. Understand everything I'm seeing in Washington I have never seen before in my life. I grew up in the country. And so I went down just to see this because Fox, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, ABC, all of them are down. Cameras, lights. By the time they got to the 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock news that night, it looked like 1,700 people standing. I don't know how the cameras do that, but they made them look like the biggest crowd you've ever seen. They left those steps and went across the street and walked into Congressman's office, congressional offices, and had conversation. We're looking at 2.5 million members in our denomination with some of the greatest social policy that any denomination has across this country, believing in dealing with the issues of equality, dealing with the issues of equity, dealing with the issues of interpersonal communication, dialogue, and love for one another, and for those who are locked out, broken, and despised. And yet, when we organize across this nation, we're leading immigration movements everywhere I go. We're on the front line. We're leading them. But our T-shirts read Immigration Now, not Presbyterian Church USA. Our children go over on mission trips and see the world and do mission work. And they're taught how to do it. At very young ages. They come back and we don't help them make the connection that the same person that they built the house for across in Chiapas, down the street from their church, is actually the cousin of that same person in the same town. Because this is a globalized society. It is broadening every day. And we fail to make these connections. And we also fail to nurture them after they are confirmed. Confirmation, they're fine, they're young, oh, we love our little children. When these children begin to have their minds turning about their own politics and their own understanding of what is taking place, when they bring friends home and start talking about friends that they're making that we have created boundaries around, when they begin to talk about reshaping and redeveloping not just the world but the church, they're no longer cute. and we let them go, and we turn them over to something else. And what they end up doing is either leaving the church or hanging out there apart from the church. And we have very few measures after that of drawing them back in, because we don't want them thinking. We like them as young, cute children. I'm suggesting that this is a whole apathy around how we treat our generations. Is an apathy about how we see ourselves in an electoral process. Is an apathy about how we organize for true social change. And if we don't learn to do this, we've got a media out here that is organizing around sensationalism. And they will drive all of that in every media piece that they possibly can and shape some minds in some very different ways. And I think that's the kind of dissonance we're seeing on these issues today.